You already signed it, old man. The house isn't yours anymore. The words hit me harder than a punch. My coffee cup slipped, hot liquid spilling across the table, the bitter smell of burnt grounds filling the kitchen. On the table lay a plastic folder, sleek and new. Inside, papers with my name at the bottom, my signature, perfect, steady, without a shake. Only, it wasn't mine. What the hell is this? My voice cracked. I didn't sign this. Look closer. David jabbed his finger at the line, his silver bracelet clinking like chains. That's your name. Black ink, black and white. You gave the house away. Maybe you just don't remember. My throat was dry. I knew my own letters, shaky, crooked, sometimes barely legible. But these lines were sharp, flawless, like someone had erased me and replaced me with a straighter version of myself. It's a forgery, I said. You can't do this. He smirked and pulled a set of keys from his pocket. Among the shiny new ones dangled my old garage key, the one I'd lost a month ago. He spun it on his finger, metal flashing. Can't? He leaned closer, his cologne mixed with the cold smell of steel. There's no can't, there's me. And there are the papers. That's all that matters. My chest burned. Shame, rage, humiliation, all twisted together, like someone had pressed a hot iron against my heart. I'm alive, I forced out. Not on paper, he replied, snapping the folder shut. And paper doesn't lie. He thought he buried me with forged ink, but I'll answer with the real ink. Shaky, imperfect, mine. And it will bury his lies deeper than any grave. Hit that subscribe button right now. Stay until the end and watch how I drag the truth out from under their forgeries. Drop your city in the comments, and I'll make sure it shows up when the final blow lands. The kettle clicked off, and the radio filled the kitchen with traffic updates on 101, a voice too cheerful for the hour. Stripes of sunlight cut across the table I'd sanded 30 years ago, highlighting the scratches Linda used to call our history. I reached for the toast, too slow. The edges had already burned, the smell of charred bread mixed with the faint lemon of countertop cleaner I'd sprayed last night. My hands shook when I scraped black crumbs into the sink. They've shaken for years, but every tremor now feels like proof for somebody else's story. The phone buzzed, a text from David. Send me your insurance card, front back. I'll put everything on autopay. Easier this way. No good morning, no dad. Just an order dressed as kindness. I stared at the card in my wallet, thought about taking the photo, put the phone face down instead. The fridge groaned like it was tired of listening. By mid-morning, I was in the garage, the air thick with oil and dust. My receipts live in a dented toolbox under screwdrivers and tape. Not organized, not pretty, but faithful. When I tugged the drawer, it jammed halfway like always. Inside were bills, checks, each with my scrawled name limping across the bottom. Crooked but mine. A car door slammed outside. Voices carried over the hedge. The new couple across the street. The ones with the perfect lawn. I stepped into the doorway, lifted a hand. Morning, I said. The husband didn't bother waving back. He pointed toward my siding. Your son said you're finally moving out, Frank. Guess the HOA can save on letters about that fence. My mouth dried. Not moving. He chuckled as if I was the punchline to my own joke. Just what he said at the meeting. Downsizing, right? Good luck. He walked off before I could answer. His wife gave me a polite half smile. Back inside, the landline rang. A recorded voice from the HOA, community meeting, Thursday 7 p.m., clubhouse, budget review, and new business. New business, always someone sharpening their teeth. At noon, Tom, the retired mailman, knocked on my door. His skin looked like paper left in the sun. He leaned on the frame like we were conspirators. Your boy asked if I still had my notary stamp, he said low. Told him I let it expire years ago. Just thought you should know. The fridge clicked on behind me. Tom patted my shoulder, left before I found words. Later, I drove to Walgreens for vitamins I don't need anymore. Habit. The automatic doors sighed open, spilling bleach-cold air. The clerk typed my name, chewed gum, squinted. Profile's been updated. Your son's the primary contact now. Good to have family looking out, right? I nodded, but it felt like a line had been crossed while I wasn't watching. Back home, the mailbox coughed up a glossy envelope. Golden Oaks Assisted Living. Smiling men in pastel sweaters grinned from the cover. Inside, the word independence appeared 4 times in 3 paragraphs. I shoved it under the toolbox tray in the garage, paper on paper, lies on dust. That night, sitting on the porch, I signed my name on a blank sheet just to see it steady, even if shaky. It wasn't pretty, but it was mine. From the attic, a board creaked as the air cooled, the house reminding me it still knows who lives here. David showed up just before 6 with 2 men I didn't know and a woman with a tape measure clipped to her back pocket. He texted dinner, but they walked in like a team. The smell of cologne, takeout soy sauce, and the lemon cleaner I used that morning got into a small fight in the hallway. "Guys, this is my dad," David said, already moving a chair to the wall. "Don't mind the clutter. We'll open the space up." "Open it up for what?" I asked. "For breathing," the woman said, measuring the window like the air was for sale. One of the men tapped my wall with his knuckle and nodded to himself like it answered. I set plates on the table out of habit. The taller man sat where Linda used to sit. He scrolled his phone and said, "So, this is the one with the original hardwood?" Cute. Cute. Like a puppy that needed training. David put his phone on speaker. "Yeah, we're here now," he told someone. "Kitchen's a gut. And yes, my dad's on board. Thursday works." He winked at me like we were sharing a joke I hadn't heard. From the speaker, a woman said something about availability at Golden Oaks and paperwork streamlined. The room went quiet long enough for me to hear the fridge click on. "Turn that off," I said. He turned the volume down instead. "We're multitasking." We ate lukewarm noodles out of cartons. Chopsticks scratched cardboard. One of the men asked, "Frank, you gonna keep the garage stuff, or can we stage it as a workshop vibe? Buyers eat that up." He laughed and didn't wait for my answer. The woman set her tape on the mantel and reached for Linda's picture. "This should come down. Personal items push buyers away." "Don't touch that," I said. "Relax, Dad." David lifted the frame himself and leaned it behind the couch, face to the wall. "We're just visualizing." "Visualize somewhere else," I said. But it sounded like I was asking permission in my own house. When they finished eating, David slid a single sheet across the table. "Sign the delivery receipt. It's for the new smoke detectors. HOA requires it." I read the top line. No words about smoke detectors. No words I liked. "This isn't a receipt," I said. He smiled like a teacher catching a kid almost cheating. "It's a standard form. You make this difficult when it could be easy." The taller man took a lazy lap around the room, peering down the hall. "Man, your dad's lucky. He gets to just move and not think about any of this." "I think about it," I said. He shrugged. "Sure." David gathered the cartons, tossed them forcefully enough that sauce splashed inside the trash. "He overthinks," he said to his friends, not to me. "He writes like a doctor and then argues with the prescription." They laughed. The laugh felt practiced. In the garage, the tape lady called, "Come see this attic pull down." The ladder unfolded with a tired groan. She coughed at the first breath of dust and grinned. "Storage gold. We'll shoot this for the listing." David climbed 2 steps, looked into the dark, then climbed back down like he didn't want the dust on his shirt. "We'll hire junk removal," he said. "No offense, Dad." "All offense taken," I said. "Don't be dramatic," he answered. He closed the ladder too quickly, pinching my palm when I reached to steady it. Pain flashed up my wrist. He didn't notice, or pretended not to. "We'll be back Saturday," he told his friends. "Bring the lens that does the wide shot." When the door closed behind them, the house exhaled. I stood in the entry and listened to the quiet reassemble itself. Fridge, clock, a car far off on El Camino. The chair they moved left a pale square on the rug. The mantel looked naked without Linda. In the kitchen, I found the receipt where I'd slid it under the toaster. At the bottom was a line with my name printed under it. The space for a signature looked like a small trap. I put it beside an old plumbing bill with my real handwriting, the one that slants and hesitates. My letters looked tired, but they were mine. The other page wanted to borrow my name and keep it. The porch light hummed when I flipped it on. Moths beat themselves silly against the bulb. I opened the front door and stood there until the night cooled the anger in my teeth. From the attic, a board popped again. The sound reached me like a small warning or a small promise. The clubhouse smelled like old carpet and Costco cookies. Rows of white plastic chairs scraped against the floor as neighbors shuffled in. A folding table at the front held a pitcher of water. Styrofoam cups stacked like waiting mouths. Fluorescent lights hummed above us, the kind of sound that makes you grind your teeth without knowing. I sat near the back, papers folded in my jacket. Property tax receipts, my handwriting slanted and broken. Proof I was still here. Proof I still paid. The chair felt smaller than it used to. David walked in 10 minutes late, wearing the jacket he saves for listings, the one with the shiny lapel that looks like it was cut from someone else's confidence. He shook hands, patted backs. The HOA president clapped him on the shoulder. I watched it all like a man watching a movie he didn't buy a ticket for. "Let's start," the president said, rapping a pen against the table. "Budget review, then new business." New business, always the part where someone loses. They droned through numbers, roof repairs, pool maintenance. My hearing faded until I caught my name. "Anne Frank's place," someone said. Laughter slipped in like a draft. David leaned back in his chair, arms wide, voice smooth. "It's handled. We've got paperwork moving. House will transfer soon, and we'll finally address that fence issue. No more letters." A murmur rolled across the room. Someone chuckled. A woman whispered too loud, "About time." I stood. "That's not correct." Heads turned, plastic chairs squeaked. My own voice sounded thin, like a radio losing signal. David didn't flinch. "Dad, we already talked about this. Don't confuse everyone. It's stressful enough." The HOA president cleared his throat. "As long as documents are filed, we'll proceed. If you've got disputes, keep them outside the meeting, please." "Disputes?" I felt the heat in my face. "I haven't signed anything." A neighbor raised a brow. "But your son said—" "My son says a lot," I snapped, sharper than I meant. The room tightened, like everyone had drawn their mouths into polite little knots. David's smile was patient, almost saintly. "He forgets sometimes," he told them, voice dipped in honey. "I managed the details for him. It's better this way." It landed like a hammer, the word "forgets." The implication hung in the stale air, heavier than the hum of the lights. Someone behind me whispered, "It happens at his age." Another chuckle. The sound tore at me worse than if they'd shouted. I wanted to slam my receipts on the table, wave my real handwriting like a flag. Instead, I sat down, hands locked together. The pages in my jacket crinkled, reminding me they were still there, reminding me I wasn't yet erased. By the end of the meeting, David was leaning on the refreshment table, eating a cookie, laughing like a man among equals. I walked past him toward the door. He didn't stop me, just spoke loud enough for those nearest to hear. "Love you, Dad. We'll go over the forms again tomorrow." It sounded like kindness. It felt like chains. Outside, the night smelled of wet pavement and burnt coffee. The porch light of the clubhouse flickered once, then held steady. I stood in the parking lot, my car the only one older than 20 years, and clenched the steering wheel so hard the plastic creaked when I finally drove home. The house was too quiet when I got back from the clubhouse. Even the fridge seemed to hesitate before kicking on, like it was waiting for me to break first. I heated soup, let it boil over, wiped the burner clean with a towel that still smelled of bleach. Headlights washed across the window at 9. David didn't knock, he used his own key. The sound of it in the lock was sharper than the chime on my old clock. He came in carrying a leather briefcase, dropped it on the table with a thud that made the silverware rattle. "Sit down, Dad," he said, already unzipping. "We need to go through this before Thursday." He pulled out a stack of crisp forms, clipped together. Notarized blanks, lines waiting for my name. At the top, consent to transfer. At the bottom, a space large enough to swallow me whole. "I didn't agree to this," I said. "You will," he answered. He smoothed a page with the side of his hand, neat, like a man ironing a shirt. "Golden Oaks has a room ready, Thursday 3 p.m. They held it for us. Don't make me look stupid." He slid a pen across the table. The cheap plastic body knocked against my plate. Soup rippled. "Take it back," I said. My voice was low but steady. "I'm not signing." David exhaled through his nose. He leaned against the chair opposite me, the smell of cologne and printer toner drifting over the table. "You keep saying no, but the world doesn't wait for your no. Things move, documents move, people move. Better to accept it." He gathered the forms into a neat pile, tapped them twice on the wood. Then he stood and walked to the mantel. My wife's photograph, he'd faced it to the wall days ago, still sat there. He flipped it up, looked at it, then set it down again without a word. "Don't touch that," I said. "I'm making sure it doesn't break when movers come through." He smiled like he'd said something generous. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should. I imagined each second signing my name without me. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. He checked his watch. "Then I'll sign for you. Thursday. We'll both be where we need to be." I stood. The chair legs shrieked across the tile. He didn't flinch. "Good night, Dad," he said, voice flat. He packed the forms back into his case and clicked the lock. When the door shut behind him, the house exhaled again. I pressed both hands flat on the table. Paper dust clung to my skin. Upstairs, a board popped in the attic. The sound rolled through the ceiling like a reminder. My eyes lifted to the hatch above the hallway. I hadn't been up there in months, but I knew what waited. The old receipts, the tax bills, my shaky, stuttering name across every page. My real proof. David thought he had me cornered with his perfect lines and borrowed signatures, but the attic kept my truth, buried in dust, patient. Thursday was coming, so was the fight. The doorbell rang at 10 sharp. Too sharp. I opened it to find a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard, and a man in a gray suit wheeling a briefcase on tiny plastic wheels. Behind them idled a white sedan with magnetic signs on the doors. Mobile Notary Services. "Mr. Carter?" the woman asked. "We're here to finalize some paperwork." She didn't wait for me to answer. They stepped into the living room like they owned square footage. The smell of fresh toner and air-conditioned car leather came with them. David followed a second later, phone to his ear, voice raised. Yeah, we'll be done in 30. He's ready." I stood in the doorway, hands still on the knob. "I didn't schedule anything." "Of course you didn't," David said, pocketing his phone. "I did. Saves you the trouble." The man in gray sat up at the coffee table, snapping his briefcase open. Inside, stacks of paper, all neatly tabbed with yellow stickers that read, "Sign here." He set a glass of water in front of me, just out of reach. Condensation dripped down the side and pooled on the wood. "This is standard," the woman said briskly. "Consent to transfer, power of attorney updates, nothing complicated." "Nothing complicated?" I echoed. My voice sounded too thin in my own house. David pulled a chair for me. "Dad, sit. It'll be easier." I didn't move. The attic board popped once above us, faint but present. "I haven't agreed to any transfer," I said. David chuckled like I was the one being unreasonable. "Don't start, not in front of professionals. You'll embarrass yourself." The man in gray slid the first page forward. "Your signature here, please." At the bottom line sat my name already typed in bold. It stared up at me like a dare. I pushed the paper back. "Not mine." The woman frowned. "Mr. Carter, this is your legal name. It matches county records." I said it's not mine. David sighed theatrically, leaned on the back of the couch. "He does this sometimes," he told them. "Gets confused. Just give him a minute." Confused. The word cracked like a whip. The notary adjusted his glasses, waiting. The woman checked her watch. David watched me like a man waiting for a stubborn child to finally break. My throat was dry. I looked at the sweating glass of water, just out of reach. A trick, small but sharp. "I'm not signing," I said again. David's jaw tightened. He collected the papers in a neat stack, tapped them on the table. "Fine, we'll reschedule. But don't think the world waits for you, Dad. Thursday's coming. So is Golden Oaks." The woman gave me a smile meant for patience, not people. "We'll be in touch." They packed up, left the water ring on my table like a scar. The door shut, leaving the house quiet again. I stood there, heart thudding, staring at the round wet stain. Above me, another board popped in the attic. Settling, people call it. To me, it sounded like the house keeping count. Chase on El Camino smelled like carpet cleaner and coins, a mix that always made my tongue taste metal. A bowl of pens on chains sat at the counter like blue plastic flowers. I took a number, listened to the soft beeps and the murmurs of people explaining their lives through bulletproof glass. When my number flashed, I stepped up. The teller was young, ponytail tight enough to lift her eyebrows. Her name tag said Maya. "I need to review a transfer on my account," I said. "Someone filed documents with my signature. It's not mine." She clicked, eyes on the screen. "Full name?" I told her. She typed fast as rain. "Okay," she said. "I see a pending escrow and a power of attorney update." Her tone said this happened every day. Her eyes flicked to my hands on the counter, the shake I couldn't hide. "And we have your signature on file." "That signature isn't mine." "We can pull the card." She slid away, came back with a scanned page on her monitor. My name flowed across it like a road with no bumps. Confident, young, not mine. I pointed. "That's not me." She glanced at the date in the corner. "Updated Monday at 9:14 a.m. in branch." She tapped another key. "By the primary contact." "My son is not my hand," I said. A security guard shifted his weight by the door. Someone in line sighed loud enough to be part of the conversation. Maya kept her voice soft. I can make a note that you dispute the signature. A note? I heard my voice get thin. While papers move? She winced just a little. I can also print a verification form, if you'd like to sign for comparison. She slid a paper and one of the chain pens through the gap. The pen scratched. My name came out the way it always did, hesitating, leaning, correcting itself mid-stroke, like a man learning to walk again every morning. She scanned it. The machine chirped. The screen showed two names side by side, mine and a stranger wearing my face. They don't match, she said, almost to herself. Then stop the transfer, I said. She looked at a box I couldn't see. I can escalate, she said carefully. There's a process. It may take... Sir, the guard said gently from the door. Not a threat, a reminder. Behind me, someone muttered, should have handled it with family. Another voice. Poor guy. The glass felt colder than it should under my fingertips. I pulled my hand away and left a half moon of heat. The doors hissed when I walked out. Sun hit me like a question. On the sidewalk, a man in a suit was on his phone, laughing too loud. For a second, I thought it was David. It wasn't. He was everywhere anyway. I crossed to the USPS next door. The air inside was a different sort of cold. A woman behind the counter said, "Next," in a voice that had said it 10,000 times. I need to mail documents, I said, tracked, signed for. She slid me a form. Recipient, an attorney. The word felt like a tool finally in my hand. I filled the boxes slowly, the pen catching on the cheap paper. My letters shook and landed anyway. When I was done, I pressed the form flat with my palm. At the counter to my left, a young guy filled out a change of address card, flipping it back and forth, like it might decide for him. To my right, an older woman sealed a padded envelope and whispered to it like a prayer. Anything liquid, fragile, perishable, or potentially hazardous? The clerk asked. Just the truth, I said. She didn't smile. She stamped. The sound was firm, final. Outside, the parking lot hummed with the freeway. I sat in my car with the engine off and watched my breath fog the windshield even though it wasn't that cold. In the cup holder, a receipt from Walgreens with my name crooked at the bottom. In my pocket, the postal receipt that said someone would have to look me in the eye to deny delivery. On paper, I was losing. In me, I wasn't done. I put the car in drive. The attic waited at home, the boards ready to pop when the house cooled. People call that settling. To me, it sounded like counting down. The house held its breath after they left. Even the fridge seemed quieter, like it was tired of taking sides. I sat at the table with a mug of coffee gone cold, staring at the brown ring it left on the wood. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. Every second felt like a reminder of time other people thought I no longer owned. I called Tom, the retired mailman. It rang 7 times before voicemail cut in. Leave a message. I didn't. I hung up and tried another number. An old friend from work, straight to voicemail. I left a short sentence that sounded like begging even as I said it. Just call me back. The silence afterward was heavier than the ring. Around 8, I walked to Walgreens. Automatic doors side open. Cold air hitting me in the face like disapproval. The pharmacy line was short, just me and a woman with hair the color of ash. The clerk scanned my name, frowned. Prescription's already been picked up, he said. By who? He shrugged. Son's listed as primary. Shows it was signed out yesterday. I felt my chest tighten. It wasn't me. The system shows it was, he said, already turning to the next customer. The woman behind me gave me a small, pitying smile. I hated it more than if she'd laughed. Outside, the night air smelled of car exhaust and fried chicken from the takeout place across the street. I stood under the Walgreens sign, red letters buzzing, and let the plastic bag in my hand dangle empty. People walked past without looking. Back home, the mail waited like another ambush. A glossy brochure from Golden Oaks, thicker this time, with photos of smiling residents playing cards, captions about freedom from worry. I tossed it on the counter. It slid and landed against the mug, knocking it over. Coffee pooled, thin and cold, crawling to the edge of the table. I cleaned it with a towel, squeezed the fabric until brown water dripped into the sink. My reflection in the dark window looked like someone else had taken my place. At midnight, I opened a blank notebook. On the first page, I wrote in block letters, "They want me erased." My hand shook, letters uneven. I pressed harder, tore the paper. It looked ugly, but it was mine. From the attic, a board popped again, not settling this time, counting. The next morning, I couldn't stand the silence of the kitchen. The tick of the clock, the groan of the fridge, it all pressed on me like a weight. So I drove down El Camino and pulled into the diner that never closed, the one Linda used to like because the coffee was endless and tasted the same every time, burnt and loyal. The vinyl booth stuck to my jacket. A TV in the corner played Channel 7 News with the volume low, subtitles crawling. The smell of bacon grease and bleach made my stomach turn. I ordered toast and coffee, barely touched either. Two men at the counter were talking loud enough for me to hear. Golden Oaks just renovated, one said. Yeah, my aunt's there. Nice place. Better than rattling around in some old house. They laughed. I knew they weren't talking about me, but it didn't matter. The words found me anyway. The waitress set down my check before I asked. You want me to run it with your son's card? She said without thinking. My son's card? She blinked. It's listed here. Last time he paid. I pushed the slip back. Cash! My hand shook as I counted bills. The look she gave me wasn't unkind, but it burned just the same. On the way home, I saw Tom watering his lawn. I raised a hand. He looked up, then down again, fiddling with the hose like it had just gotten complicated. By the time I reached the driveway, he'd turned his back. The water hissed against the concrete. Inside, the answering machine blinked red. I pressed play. David's voice filled the kitchen. Dad, stop making calls. You're making this harder than it needs to be. Thursday's set. Don't fight it. Then silence, followed by a hang-up beep that echoed too long. I sat at the table, head in my hands. The air smelled of cold coffee and lemon polish. The house felt smaller than ever, the walls leaning in, the ceiling pressing down. The attic creaked again, one sharp pop like a gavel. I opened the notebook I'd started last night. On the next page I wrote, If I keep asking, I keep losing. I stared at it until the words blurred. Then I underlined them twice. For weeks I'd begged, explained, defended. Each time I ended up smaller, thinner, more erased. The pattern was clear. Asking meant losing. I closed the notebook, slid it under my arm, and stood. No more asking, I said out loud, my voice echoing in the empty room. The fridge kicked on, low and steady like it approved. Upstairs, another board popped in the attic. Not settling, not counting. This time, it sounded like agreement. The attic smelled of dust and old insulation, like time had been left to rot up here. I pulled the string and the ladder unfolded with a groan, every rung shaking under my weight. The single bulb dangled on its cord, yellow light carving small islands in the dark. Boxes leaned against each other, Linda's Christmas ornaments, my old drill that hadn't worked since 2004, and the metal tin where I used to keep receipts too important to throw away, but too ugly to show anyone. I slid it forward, coughing at the dust. Inside were years of bills, tax statements, plumbing invoices, an envelope from the DMV, all signed by me. My shaky, stumbling letters ran across every page. Ugly, yes, but mine. Each one proof of a hand that couldn't be faked. My hand. I compared one to the photocopy David had left on the table last week. The difference was night and day. His version was smooth, steady, confident. My real one looked like a drunk man walking a tightrope. But at least it was honest. That was the point. I stacked 3 bills and clipped them together. On the back of one envelope, I scribbled the date and wrote, Original. The ink bled a little, pen trembling. But I pressed until it showed through the paper. Evidence needed to scar. The next day I drove to Chase again, this time asking for a transaction log. The clerk printed a sheet with times, dates, and device IDs. Numbers and letters that looked like nonsense to me, but one line stood out. Log in from an iPhone at 9:14 a.m. on a Monday. I don't own an iPhone. Never have. The clerk didn't care. It's linked to your account, sir. Whose device? Can't say, she shrugged. I folded the paper, slid it into my jacket. Device ID was just another kind of signature. Not mine, his. At home, I laid everything on the table like puzzle pieces. Old bills with crooked names, bank logs showing a stranger's device, the forged form David claimed I'd signed. The clock ticked, the fridge hummed, upstairs the attic popped again, counting, approving. For the first time in weeks, I felt something different in my chest. Not anger, not despair, something sharper. Proof. I gathered the pages, slipped them into a large envelope, and wrote in block letters, for attorney. David thought paper erased me. Paper would bury him. The strip mall smelled like cinnamon and disinfectant, like a bakery open next to a dentist and they both lost. I parked crooked between a vape shop and a place that sold cell phone cases made of rhinestones. A paper sign on frosted glass read, Elder Law and Advocacy, Suite 204. The bell on the door gave a tired jingle when I pushed it. Inside, a receptionist with a sweater the color of old oatmeal looked up over half-moon glasses. Appointment? Walk in, I said. If you help people who are being signed away while they're still breathing. Something in my voice must have worked. She handed me a clipboard. The pen felt heavy. My letters dragged, but they landed. Under Emergency, I wrote YES and didn't cross it out. The attorney was a woman my daughter's age. Dark hair pulled back, sleeves rolled. Her office had a plant that looked alive on purpose and a diffuser that breathed cinnamon into the air. Diplomas on the wall. A photo of a small dog in a sweater looking unimpressed. I'm Nora Flynn, she said, shaking my hand without pity. Tell me what's happening. I laid the envelope on her desk like a heart I couldn't keep. Old bills with my crooked signature. A bank log with a device ID I didn't own. Photocopies of forms with a version of my name that didn't sweat. She didn't rush. She read, lips pressed thin, tapping a pen once for each page. You're not confused, she said finally. You're being handled. By my son. That makes it uglier, she said, not weaker. She pulled a legal pad. Here's what we do today. First, a capacity affidavit. Your doctor signs that you know what day it is and who you are. We notarize. Second, we file a revocation of any prior power of attorney. Third, we notify the bank that you dispute recent updates and demand a temporary freeze on changes pending review. Fourth, we preserve evidence. Those original signatures, gold. I don't have a power of attorney with him, I said. Then we'll revoke any claim he makes that you do. She smiled without warmth. People who forge one thing usually forge two. Her phone buzzed. She flipped it face down. Do you have a safe place for duplicates? The attic, I said before I could stop myself. And a friend who used to be a mailman. Good. We'll make 3 packets, one with me, one with you, one off-site. If a fire eats 2, the third will still bite. She printed forms. The copier coughed warm paper that smelled like a hotel hallway. Sign here, she said, and slid a pen across. My name came out stubborn and shaky. She didn't flinch. Perfect, she said. Imperfection is the easiest thing to authenticate. Her receptionist knocked, head poked in. There's a man asking if Mr. Carter's here. Nora's eyes sharpened. What man? Tall, realtor haircut, says he's family. David. Nora stood. Tell him clients aren't confirmed without consent and we don't disclose. Then lock the door. The lock clicked like a sentence ending. My phone buzzed in my pocket. 3 calls in a row from David, then a text. Stop. You're embarrassing yourself. Nora slid me a clean envelope stamped with her letterhead. This is your copy. Put it somewhere he won't clean. She eyed my hands. You're steady enough for another signature? I'm steady enough, I said. She nodded. One more thing. I'm sending you for a handwriting evaluation. It's quick. They'll compare your live signature to the perfect one, trying to wear your shoes. Judges love science more than sons. When we finished, she walked me out through a back door into an alley that smelled like rain and dumpsters. Frank, she said, using my name like a hand on my shoulder. You don't have to win today. You just have to stop losing. I tucked the envelope under my jacket. The afternoon light bounced off the hoods in the parking lot, too bright. At the corner of the strip mall, behind the glass of a boutique gym, a row of treadmills faced the street, people running and going nowhere. I kept walking. In the car, I opened the glove box and slid Nora's packet on top of the old owner's manual. Then I took out Linda's church program from the day we said goodbye, folded around a photo of us younger than I feel allowed to remember. I put the program with the packet, proof and promise, together. On the drive home, the radio talked about traffic like the world was fine. I turned it off and listened to the engine. In the rear view, a white sedan followed too closely for a mile, then turned away. My phone buzzed again and again. I let it. At home, I pulled the ladder and climbed into the attic. The heat grabbed my lungs. I slid the packet under the tin, then pushed the tin behind a beam only a man who'd lived here as long as I had would know. Boards creaked under my knees. The bulb swayed and drew a circle of light over everything I was and everything they said I wasn't. Below me, the house was quiet, holding its breath. Above me, the roof ticked as sun let go. People call that settling. I called it the sound of paper sharpening its teeth. FedEx smelled of toner and dust. the kind of air that dried your throat. I slid the originals into a manila envelope, the clerk weighing it like it was nothing. He slapped a barcode on top, handed me the receipt with a board, next. He had no idea he'd just time-stamped my survival. I mailed a second packet to Nora. Then I kept a third copy in my jacket, the edges cutting my ribs when I moved. Evidence needed to bruise. That night, I set a small recorder on the kitchen table. Cheap, bought off Amazon, red light faint. I tested it by reading Linda's recipe card for pot roast out loud. My voice sounded thin but real. When David came tomorrow, the recorder would listen even if no one else did. The next afternoon, he barged in without knocking, 2 friends in tow again. They carried coffee cups and superiority. I slipped my hand under the table, clicking the recorder on. "Dad, we need those forms back," David said. "Golden Oaks is ready." His friend grinned like it was a party trick. "I don't have them," I said. "Don't play dumb. You signed last week." He leaned over the table, his shadow smothering my papers. "Don't make this harder." "You forged my name." I kept my voice flat, feeding the recorder. His laugh was quick, sharp. "If you think anyone believes your chicken scratch over clean lines, go ahead. Try." The red light blinked steady. Proof was breathing. One of his friends wandered to the garage door, opened it, looked around. "Man, this place is ripe for staging." He picked up my wrench, set it down somewhere else. Small thefts. David noticed the attic ladder pulled down. Dust scattered. His eyes narrowed. "Been cleaning up there, Dad?" My chest tightened. "Just boxes." He stepped closer to the hallway, staring up into the dark like the house itself offended him. For a second, I thought he'd climb. I forced a cough, loud. "You thirsty? There's water." I shuffled to the sink, hands shaking but buying time. When I turned back, the ladder was closed. Dust still swirled in the air like a warning. David smirked. "Attics hide junk, not value. Don't waste your time." He left after 10 minutes of circling me like a vulture, taking his friends and the smell of cologne with him. I exhaled so hard my knees buckled, pulled the recorder from under the table, red light still blinking, his voice trapped inside. "If you think anyone believes your chicken scratch..." I pressed stop, listened back. It played clear. Upstairs, the attic boards popped twice, louder than usual, like they'd heard him too. Nora called 2 days later. Her voice came through steady, like steel wrapped in cotton. "I've reviewed everything," she said. "The handwriting expert compared your live samples to the perfect ones. They don't just mismatch, they scream forgery." I gripped the receiver tighter. "So it's enough?" "It's enough to raise eyebrows in court, and that's all we need. Once doubt's on record, the rest follows. You've got a trail, Frank. Bank logs, receipts, your originals. He can't rewrite all of it." I sat at the kitchen table, pen in my hand, notebook open. On the page I wrote, "Proof is louder than lies." My letters leaned, ink blotting. Ugly, but mine. "We'll file motions this week," Nora continued. "Meanwhile, keep duplicates separate. Don't let him corner you. If he pushes, call me before you answer." "I already mailed your packet," I said. "Good. Then even if he burns your house down, the fire dies with him, not with the evidence." I laughed once, dry. "You always talk like that?" She smiled through the line. "Only when someone's fighting their own blood." That afternoon, I drove to the storage unit on Industrial Avenue. The metal roll-up door groaned, smell of dust and motor oil hitting me like an old friend. I slid a second envelope into a locked box and closed it. 2 packets now lived outside my house. One with Nora, one here. Even if David sniffed out the attic, he'd find dust, not truth. Back home, the recorder replayed his voice again and again. "If you think anyone believes your chicken scratch..." The more I listened, the more it sounded like a confession. When David dropped by, unannounced that night, he noticed something in my face. He set his coffee on the counter, eyes narrowing. "You look smug," he said. "Just tired," I answered. He scanned the kitchen, the hall, the ceiling. His gaze lingered on the attic hatch. "You know," he said, "it'd be easier for everyone if you just stopped resisting." I leaned on the counter, let silence stretch. For once I didn't defend myself. His smirk faltered a little. "Fine," he muttered, snatching up his cup. "Thursday's still set." After he left, I opened the notebook again. Wrote, "First brick set." The attic popped once above me, like a knuckle cracking before a fight. For the first time in months, the house felt less like a coffin and more like a witness. I spotted him first in the reflection of Nora's office window. David leaning against his car across the strip mall, phone in hand but eyes on the door. He didn't wave, he didn't move, just watched like he was timing me. When I stepped outside, he pushed off the hood. Lawyers now? His smile was tight. You couldn't talk to me, your own son, but you can talk to strangers? They listen, I said. His smile thinned. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I walked past him. He followed, close enough that I could smell his cologne mixing with the exhaust of a nearby pickup. You keep this up, Dad. APS will get involved. I stopped. Adult Protective Services? Yeah, he said, voice light, like it was a joke. Somebody might think you're not safe on your own. 2 days later, the knock came. A woman with a county badge stood on my porch, clipboard hugged to her chest. Behind her, the HOA president lingered, pretending to check his phone. Mr. Carter, she said, we had a report of possible self-neglect. We just need to take a quick look around. My chest burned. Report from who? She didn't answer. She stepped inside. She glanced at the fridge, the sink, the coffee rings on the table, wrote notes on her clipboard. Do you have family assisting you? I swallowed. Too much family. She gave a polite smile that meant nothing. We'll file this as unfounded, but her pen had already scratched my name into a system that didn't care how it got there. At the door, the HOA president finally looked up. Hope everything's all right, Frank, he said, too loud for the neighbors watering their lawns. Better than you think, I answered, though my hand shook on the doorknob. Inside, I pressed my forehead to the cool wood. The house was quiet except for the fridge clicking on. Upstairs, the attic popped once, low and angry. The first envelope looked normal, white, windowed, Chase Bank logo. I tore it open standing by the mailbox, the late sun hot on my neck. Notice of transfer confirmed, it read. Effective date, Friday. Signer, Frank Carter. Only I hadn't signed anything. Inside the house, I opened my laptop, the one Linda used to keep recipes on. The email inbox was full of messages I hadn't written. Auto replies, confirmations. One caught my eye. Thank you for updating your online banking preferences. Sent yesterday, 3:47 p.m. I was at Walgreens at 3:47. My throat went dry. I scrolled, found drafts half finished in my name, words I'd never type. I consent. Please expedite. The cursor blinked like an accusation. That night I set the recorder on again, this time hidden near the mantel. I had the forged letter laid flat on the table when David came by, alone. He picked it up, waved it like proof. Bank already processed it, Dad. Why fight what's already done? I didn't sign this. He leaned close enough that I felt his breath on my cheek. Paper says you did, and paper is the only voice that matters. I kept my own voice low. I have originals. He froze a half second too long. What originals? The attic board popped above us, faint, but it pulled his eyes up. He started for the hallway. My pulse slammed in my ears. If he climbed that ladder, he'd find everything. I stepped in front of him. Linda's photo's still up there. I was sorting. He stared, weighing the lie. Finally, he smiled without humor. You always were sentimental. He turned back toward the door, the forged letter still in his hand. Leave it, I said. For a moment, I thought he'd rip it in half just to watch me bend. But he set it down slow, like a dare, and walked out. When the door shut, my knees gave out. I grabbed the letter, shoved it into a new envelope, and wrote in block letters, to storage. Tomorrow, I'd move the originals again. I sat on the floor, back against the wall, staring at the hatch above. My chest ached with the rhythm of the fridge humming. Almost lost, almost erased. But not yet. By morning, I'd moved the packet. Not attic, not garage. I drove to the Chase branch on El Camino and paid for a safety deposit box. The clerk slid a key across the counter, cold and heavy. I placed the envelope inside, shut the metal drawer, turned the key until it clicked. One copy with Nora, one copy in storage, one buried in the bank's belly. If David tore the house down, beam by beam, he'd find dust. Nothing more. At Nora's office, we notarized again, fast this time. 2 signatures, her seal pressed sharp into the page. This is your fireproof layer, she said, tapping the stamp. If he waves a forgery, this is the extinguisher. I nodded, pocketing the document like it was air. On the way home, I stopped at Walgreens for toothpaste. In line, 2 neighbors ahead of me whispered. His son's taking care of everything, one said. Good thing, the other replied. Man can't keep track of his own mail. They laughed softly, not cruel but certain. Their certainty cut deeper than a knife. I paid cash, stuffed the receipt in my wallet with the others. Receipts were my soldiers now, small and crooked but lined up. That evening David came with a different energy, brisk, businesslike, not pretending anymore. He laid a glossy HOA notice on the table. "Community meeting next Thursday," he said. "Agenda includes property transfer. I already added it." "You can't put me on an agenda like a leaky roof," I said. "You'll come," he said. "Neighbors will see. Everyone will know it's handled." He smiled, but his eyes scanned the hallway again, pausing under the attic hatch. His voice dropped. "You think hiding things in this house changes anything? Paper's louder than walls." I didn't answer. I just held his gaze until he finally looked away. When he left, the house creaked like it had been holding its breath. I climbed the attic ladder, looked at the empty space where the packet had been. For the first time in months, I felt lighter. The dust up here held no proof, no bait, just silence. I wrote in my notebook, "Court of Neighbors, next Thursday." The attic popped once, sharp as a gavel. The clubhouse parking lot was full before I even turned in. SUVs lined the curb, headlights spilling across the lawn. A Channel 7 van sat at the corner, satellite dish pointed at the sky like an accusation. I killed the engine and listened to the silence in my car. My notebook lay on the seat beside me, the last line underlined twice. "Court of Neighbors, tonight." Inside, fluorescent lights hummed, the same sound as last time, but sharper now. Folding chairs filled the hall, neighbors packed shoulder to shoulder. The HOA president cleared his throat at the front, stack of papers trembling slightly in his hand. David was already there, jacket pressed, hair too perfect. He stood near the refreshments, smiling, shaking hands. He looked like a man campaigning, like this was his election. When he saw me, his smile widened, stretched thin. He walked over, voice low enough for only me. "Don't fight tonight. Just nod when they mention the transfer. You'll look dignified." I looked at the chairs, the faces, people who'd whispered, laughed, pitied, people who thought I was already erased. "I'm not here to nod," I said. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Then you're here to humiliate yourself." The HOA president banged his gavel, a plastic one that looked like a toy. "Meeting will come to order. Tonight's agenda includes property transfer of 41 Willow Court." His eyes flicked toward me. "As represented by his son, David Carter." Murmurs rippled, a few claps. Someone whispered, "Finally." David stepped forward, shoulders broad. "My father and I have already signed the necessary paperwork. We're just formalizing." I rose slowly. The chair legs scraped the floor, sharp as a scream. "That's a lie," I said. My voice carried farther than I thought. Heads turned. The room leaned in. David laughed politely for the crowd. "He gets confused. It happens. That's why I've been handling everything." The HOA president shifted uncomfortably. "Mr. Carter, if this is true, we'll need clarity." "Clarity is all I have," I said. I pulled the first envelope from my jacket, thick with documents, the flap sealed and stamped. I set it on the table at the front. The murmur grew louder. Cameras clicked from the back of the room. A neighbor whispered, "What's he got?" David's jaw tightened. His hand flexed at his side. But he kept his smile, the politician's mask. "We don't need theatrics. Paperwork's already done." "Then let the papers talk," I said. The attic wasn't here to pop above me, but in my chest I felt its echo. Tonight the house would speak through me. Nora stepped out of the second row like she'd been waiting for a door to open. "Nora Flynn, counsel," she said to the president, voice calm but carrying. She set a slim blue folder beside my envelope. "First item is capacity." She flipped the folder open. A single page with a notary seal caught the fluorescent light. "Affidavit of capacity," she said. "Signed yesterday by Dr. Morales, Sutter Health. Orientation and judgment intact. Date, place, person, purpose. All verified." The president adjusted his glasses. "Can we hear a few?" he asked, half to her, half to me. Nora nodded. "Go ahead." I faced the room. The smell of Costco cookies and coffee felt suddenly sweet instead of cheap. "What's today's date?" the president asked. "Thursday," I said. 17th, 7 p.m., HOA Clubhouse. Address? 41 Willow Court, San Mateo, zip 94402. A whisper rolled through the chairs. "Who is the president of this association?" he tried. "Grant Weber," I said, meeting his eyes. He winced. I was right. "Purpose of this meeting?" "Budget review and new business," I said. And my son trying to turn me into paperwork. A few people laughed, the first real sound that wasn't polite. David cut in, smile tight. On paper, sure, he passes. In real life, he forgets. He has good days. Tonight is a good day. That's not how capacity works, Nora said, dry. She placed another page on the table, the notary stamp deep as a boot print. But since we love paper here, let's let it speak. She grabbed a blank HOA sign-in sheet and slid it in front of me with a courtesy pen on a chain. The chain rattled. Sign your name, Frank, as you do. I did. The pen scratched. The F rose too tall. The K fell out of line. The whole thing leaned like it had learned to walk late in life. Ugly, honest, mine. Nora lifted it and held it beside a blown-up printout of the perfect signature David had filed. Smooth arcs, confident loops, not a tremor in sight. Visual comparison, she said. Live versus exhibit. She didn't say forgery yet. She didn't need to. Gasps came in small, honest shapes. The Channel 7 lens zoomed, red tally light burning. Someone in the back whispered, "That's not the same hand." David laughed too loud. He can shake when he wants and stop when he wants. He rehearsed this. He gestured at my name like it offended him. We're wasting time. Nora's tone didn't change. 2 points, she said. 1, capacity affirmed by a physician. 2, the only steady line in this room is Mr. Carter's truth. She tapped my fresh signature. It shakes. It always has. That's what makes it authentic. The president cleared his throat. For the record, we acknowledge the affidavit, he said, glancing at the seal again, like it might bite, and the live signature. Put both in the minutes, Nora said. I turned to the room. I forget some things, I said, but not my name, and not what my son is doing with it. A neighbor who'd laughed at me last week stared at the floor. Another lifted her phone, filming now, not smiling. The fluorescent hum carried on, indifferent, but the room had tilted. By degrees, sure, but tilted. David leaned in close enough that only I heard. Enjoy your moment, he said through his teeth. Paper moves anyway. Good, I said. I brought more. Nora lifted the second envelope from her bag, heavier this time. She spread the pages on the table, the thin paper curling under the fluorescent lights. These, she said, are Chase transaction logs from last month. Each login is recorded with a device ID. Mr. Carter Sr. does not own an iPhone. Yet we have multiple logins from an iPhone registered under David Carter's number. She tapped the page with her pen. Same day, same hour, he claimed his father updated powers of attorney. The president leaned forward, squinting. Can we confirm that? Bank manager is here, Nora said. She gestured to the side. A man in a gray suit, tag-reading Chase, stood, cleared his throat. His voice was stiff, formal. Our system shows activity from device ending in 28. That number matches the contact we have for David Carter. The elder Mr. Carter has no such device on file. Murmurs broke like a wave. Someone whispered, "That's not just sloppy, that's theft." David raised his hand, forcing a laugh. Bank errors happen. Systems mislabel. I was helping him log in. He asked me to. This is a witch hunt. Helping him. Nora's brow arched. She pointed at the timestamp. 9:14 a.m., Monday. Where were you, Frank? Walgreens, I said, picking up a prescription that wasn't there. A voice from the audience. I saw him that morning. He was in line. Heads turned toward the speaker, a neighbor 2 streets over. She shifted in her seat, but her voice stayed clear. He was arguing with the clerk, I remember. Another ripple through the crowd. Channel 7's camera swung to catch her face. Nora nodded once. So while Mr. Carter was at Walgreens, someone logged into his account on an iPhone linked to his son. At the same time, fraudulent paperwork was filed. That's not help. That's identity theft. Gasps. Someone hissed. The HOA president's pen froze mid-note. David's mask cracked for the first time. His smile didn't reach his eyes. He's exaggerating. He doesn't even remember what day it was. He remembered your device, I said. My voice cut sharper than I planned. Paper doesn't forget. The room shifted again, murmurs louder, closer to judgment. The fluorescent lights hummed, steady, like a verdict warming up. Nora let the murmurs settle, then pulled a small recorder from her folder. The red light blinked like an eye that never closed. She set it on the table, pressed play. David's voice filled the clubhouse, sharp and clear. Don't play dumb, you signed last week. A pause, then laughter, cruel. If you think anyone believes your chicken scratch over clean lines, go ahead. Try. The sound rattled the folding chairs. A woman in the front row covered her mouth. The Channel 7 cameraman zoomed in until the recorder filled his frame. "That's doctored," David snapped, his face flushed, the calm realtor mask cracking. "Out of context. Everyone says things in frustration." Nora didn't flinch. "Then let's add more context." She pulled a letter from Golden Oaks, slid it across the table. "Signed intake form, dated before Mr. Carter ever agreed. Who booked the slot?" The coordinator from Golden Oaks stood from the back, hands folded tight. "David Carter called, twice, said his father couldn't live alone. He left a deposit." The crowd erupted, gasps, whispers, heads turning. Someone hissed, "He tried to bury his own father alive." "And Adult Protective Services?" Nora continued, voice sharp. "Visit filed on a false report. Who called them?" Silence. Then a man from APS, gray badge clipped to his belt, raised a hand. "Tip was anonymous, but came from a number we traced back to a Carter family account." His voice carried no emotion, but the words landed like blows. The HOA president's gavel banged plastic against wood. "Order, please! Order!" But the noise didn't quiet. I stood, notebook in hand. "He told me himself. Keep this up and APS will get involved." I wrote it down that day. I held up the page, the block letters uneven but dark. "Too much family." Gasps again. Someone shouted, "That's abuse!" Another neighbor, "Unbelievable." David's face twisted. "You people don't understand. I was protecting him, planning ahead." "Protecting him?" Nora cut in. "By forging signatures, seizing accounts, and booking him into a facility against his will? That's not protection. That's exploitation." The fluorescent lights hummed louder, the room alive with whispers and outrage. The Channel 7 mic hovered near the front row, catching every word. David's voice cracked. "This is a setup. He can't even keep his own house straight." I leaned forward, loud enough for everyone. "The house remembers me. It creaks when I walk. It counts when I breathe. Paper remembers too. And it doesn't forget who tried to steal it." The room went silent for a second, the kind of silence that means the tide has turned. The clubhouse was boiling with voices when Nora raised her hand. She pulled the last envelope from her bag, thicker than the rest, sealed with the bank's blue stamp. "Final exhibit," she said, her voice calm as stone. "Original signatures, preserved in a Chase safety deposit box, verified by staff this afternoon." She slit the envelope, slid the pages across the table. Receipts, tax bills, checks, everyone signed by me. My name stumbling, leaning, ugly but alive. The Channel 7 camera zoomed. Neighbors craned their necks. The HOA president bent low, glasses slipping down his nose. These don't match what we received last month," he said, voice uneasy. "Of course they don't," Nora said. She lifted the forged form David had filed, laid it beside the originals. Smooth versus broken. Fake versus truth. Side by side, the lie looked too clean, the truth too human. Murmurs swelled into gasps. Someone whispered, "That's not even close." Another, "He forged his own father." David's hands shook as he pointed. "He gave me permission. He said I could handle it. He forgets." His voice cracked, echoing in the fluorescent hum. "Then why?" Nora asked, eyes locked on him. "Did you log in with your own phone? Why did you deposit at Golden Oaks in your name? Why does the recorder play your voice threatening your own father?" David's mask shattered. "Because it was supposed to be mine," he shouted. His voice bounced off the walls, too loud, too raw. "The house, the account, everything. He doesn't even use it right. I earned it." The room froze. Gasps, whispers, hands clapped to mouths. The Channel 7 mic caught every syllable. The president's pen stopped moving. I stepped forward, my hand resting on the table, the paper cool under my fingers. The attic wasn't here, but I felt it above me all the same, boards popping like applause. "You buried me in paper," I said, my voice steady, clear. "Tonight, paper buried you." The room exploded, shouts, gasps, some clapping, some simply staring. The HOA president banged his toy gavel until it squeaked. "Order! Order! Effective immediately, the transfer is void, and this matter will be referred to the county." David stood frozen, face pale, sweat shining under the cheap lights. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. I gathered the originals into my envelope, held them tight against my chest. The truth was heavy, but it was mine again. Outside, The Channel 7 van's dish turned, cameras waiting. Neighbors spilled into the lot, some whispering apologies, some just staring. David didn't follow. He stayed behind, chained to the lie he'd built. Channel 7 ran the story the very next night. I watched it on my old TV, the volume low, captions rolling. The anchor's voice was smooth, almost bored. San Mateo man exposes forged property transfer by his own son at HOA meeting. Investigation pending. They cut to footage of me, standing at the clubhouse table, papers spread like a shield. Then David's face, twisted and shouting, the words, "It was supposed to be mine," replayed over and over. The chyron beneath read, "Elder fraud claims, son under scrutiny." I muted the sound. The image was enough. The next morning, neighbors waved again. Some sheepishly, some too eager, but they waved. The same woman who once called me confused brought over a plate of cookies, still warm. "Sorry," she said. "We believed the wrong story." I thanked her, though the apology felt more like for herself than for me. Still, the house smelled like chocolate chip instead of lemon polish for once. At the bank, the manager shook my hand. "We've frozen unauthorized access. Your son's name is scrubbed from every field." He slid me new papers, my name typed in crooked letters I didn't care about, because at the bottom, I signed in my own. Ugly, shaking, mine. At home, I sat at the kitchen table, sunlight falling through the blinds. The fridge hummed, steady as ever. On the mantel, Linda's photo faced forward again. Her smile in the frame was tilted, just like my signature, imperfect but honest. I climbed to the attic one last time. The bulb buzzed overhead, lighting the dust like falling snow. The tin box still sat there, lighter now that the originals had found daylight. I picked it up, carried it down, set it on the kitchen counter. From my notebook, I tore the first page I'd written weeks ago. "They want me erased." I folded it, placed it inside the tin, then closed the lid. Not to forget, but to remember how close I'd come. The key to the attic hatch hung on its old nail. I took it down, walked outside, and dropped it into the storm drain at the curb. The clink echoed faint, swallowed by water and iron. The attic had done its job. It didn't need to keep count anymore. That night, dinner was simple. Soup and toast. Nothing fancy. But the house felt lighter. I didn't eat in silence. I ate in peace. For weeks they'd tried to make me believe paper was louder than me. But tonight, sitting at my own table, I knew better. Family is supposed to be a road with two lanes. Mine tried to run me off it, so I walked away and carried what was mine with me. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked open.